Hello, everyone. Welcome to Simply Seasonal. Megan and Kara here, and we are talking about food and herbs for cancer today. We're going to be diving into cancer and looking at disease from a holistic lens, which is really valuable because we're not just taking into account the physical body, we're also looking at the energetic and the emotional body, which is usually where disease, the root cause of any disease, lies in that area. So, we're going to be talking a lot about that in addition to the food and herbs to help, of course, nourish the physical body. And the great thing about this is that the same thing that you would do for prevention would be the same thing you would do for treatment as well. So, no matter where you are on the spectrum, you can use this information, and it's really valuable for all of us to do.
Yes, whether you've been diagnosed with cancer or not, we are all fighting cancer. And actually, we don't like to use that term of fighting cancer because we're working with it. It's part of life, right? So we're always creating these abnormal cells. It's going to happen because we create so many cells and produce so many cells per day that something's going to go wrong. But the beautiful thing about the human body is we know how to fix ourselves. And so we just have to give ourselves the right tools through lifestyle, through using food, through using all these modalities that we're going to talk about today to understand and help our bodies take back our health and let it do what it is meant to do.
I love that. And basically, that goes along with our Simply Seasonal philosophy, which is really that the body is a self healing organism. So, when we give it the chance, to heal, it will on its own. But a lot of times, so many things get in our way from the foods that we're eating, the toxicity in our environment. All these things really hinder our body from functioning optimally. So we're going to be talking about how to do that and how that applies directly to cancer. And of course, with Simply Seasonal, we talk about the seasons, and that really also does apply to cancer as well. How different seasons heal and address different organ systems of the body, because of course cancer can be in a lot of different areas. So we're going to be talking about that, those organ systems, what kind of foods will heal according to the seasons, and really what different seasons, like the difference between eating in a spring and summer type of way versus eating in a fall and winter type of way, why they're both important when we're talking about preventing and treating any stage of cancer. So that's really where our philosophy, the root of our philosophy lies, and how that directly applies to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know us well, we are both holistic health coaches. We've both used food as our medicine to help heal ourselves through certain conditions, and have understood the power of food. And everything you put in your body is either helping you or hurting you. And that's such a powerful statement because we have the choice of what we can put in our bodies as far as food. Some things we don't have a choice of, as far as the air quality that we're around. It's not so easy to just pick up and move. So we have no choice. But there are a lot of choices and a lot of things we can do for ourselves and for our loved ones to help reduce the toxicity and make good choices for ourselves so that what we're putting in our body is helping us and not hurting us and making the job even more difficult. So these are all things, whether it's cancer or whether it's gut issues or whether it's chronic fatigue or whether it's autoimmune diseases, anything. These choices are going to help your body. Like, as we said, we are these self-healing organisms. And so these are the things that are going to help your body help yourself.
Exactly. And, that's so important because all of these chronic diseases that we see, like cancer, they don't just happen overnight. It's a lifetime of buildup. So we want to make sure that, of course, the earlier we can start changing things over, the better. But things do take some time, but they also just take consistency, and making these changes really do make a big impact. So we'll be getting into that as well. And just a little background, I guess, on both of us. Like Kara was saying, we're both holistic health coaches. I have a background in as a natural food chef, and more on the Chinese medicine side of things. So we're going to be talking a bit about that. I also worked with cancer patients when I first came down here to Houston and started my business. I was a personal chef, going into their homes and cooking and using food and herbs and things like that. And one of the most humbling things I found was when I was working with my clients who were deep in treatment, how I was actually juggling that balance between treating the person for the cancer, but also fighting, literally fighting the treatment because they were so nauseous. They weren't able to eat anything, keep any food down. So that made my job almost impossible, because I wasn't really able to treat the full client, the full person. And that's really what we're going to be looking at today is the whole person and really meeting yourself where you're at, because I understand too, depending on where you are, especially if you're going through treatment, a lot of these things could be difficult. And at the end of the day, it's like if you could just feed yourself, that's a win. But at least you have a lot of knowledge behind you of what it is that would be maybe most beneficial for how your symptoms are showing. Are you having expressions of hot and pain and burning and inflammation after radiation and a lot of treatment? Are you feeling chronically fatigued, and depleted, and all of that? There's going to be different ways that you would nourish yourself for both of those. So that's kind of my background with cancer and food.
And this all comes down to balance. And so I've studied more on the Ayurvedic side, which is how me and Megan's thought processes kind of come together so beautifully, because there's this big overlap. And what we realize is, the whole seasonal thing really goes along with everything, which is where Simply Seasonal was born. But when there is that imbalance, we can use food. And so we want to give you today a toolbox of things that you can do. Everybody's different. Everybody's at a different stage. Everybody's, we honor you. Like if you are going through treatment, this isn't like shameful. This isn't, like you are where you are, and, own it. And, we all make our own choices, and we totally respect that. We're all in a different place. So, just dive in wherever you're at. And we're going to talk a lot about today, just becoming aware of how your body feels, what your body needs, because there is two different ways, like Megan was saying, to look at this disease, like there is of any disease. And so we're going to approach it from two different ways, and you figure out where you need to be and what you need to do for yourself.
Yeah, and getting into kind of looking at what cancer is. So, like we were saying, when we look at it from a holistic perspective, to heal disease, we look at the whole person and understand the connection between the mind, the body, and the spirit, because we are not just one component of that. Disease does not just affect one component of that. Actually, usually what happens is, like I said earlier, disease starts in that energetic body, emotional body, and then finally proliferates to the physical body. So the physical body is actually the last place we see disease show up. And what it's doing along the way is disease is always an opportunity to change. And because it's a message that something's not working in life. So we want to make that shift and make that change. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, where that root cause for you might be, or in the future could potentially be. So we want to prevent that from happening. And so we look deeper than just the physical body. So as much as we're addressing the healing benefits of food and herbs, we're also addressing the energetic and emotional origin of this disease. Because like I said, that's how it proliferates over time.
And this is something that, if someone were to say to you, oh, your pain or your disease is in this area of your body, like you must be fearful of something, or you must be going through grief. And of course, our first reaction is like, no, everything's fine. I'm good, right? Like we put this shell around our, like, life is good. We're fine. Everything's fine. But it's interesting getting asked the question, and this happened to me recently, where of course it's like, no, it's fine. That was my answer to the person. But, when I came home and I sat with it and I was with my pain and it was quiet, things started to proliferate emotionally. And it was like, oh, there it is, right? And we can keep our lives so busy and noisy that we can keep that stuff down, but finding that quiet time. And so, of course, something like yoga, meditation, just even quiet walking, and even in your sleep, right? Like when you're finding this quiet downtime, when the TV isn't blaring at you or you're not listening to something or someone, just finding that quiet time is where we can really tap into what we need for our bodies, and what listening, right? Like taking time to listen to our bodies.
Yeah, and I love that because, cancer it's the presence of cells that do not go through apoptosis or the dying off, and they continue to reproduce. And that happens through, I mean, of course, it's an abnormal cell formation. It's not normal, but for it to reside in the body, it has that same energetic, which we're going to get into, this energetic feeling of pushing it down and continuing on, right? Like, yes, we had this happen, but we can't deal with it now. We got to keep moving forward. And so it keeps getting pushed and pushed. And this is how those cells that are an invader for the body wants to clear it. We're pushing it down, and the body can't clear it now. And so now those start to reside in the body and start to accumulate and proliferate as we continue to move forward. So that's really how this concept of that energetic and emotional body really applies to the physical body when we're looking at cancer.
Yeah, and so we can take this and actually use Ayurveda and traditional and Chinese medicine, kind of have these like maps of our body, of our organ systems, using chakras and using different seasons of when we heal things. And right now we're recording this in the fall, but we love the fall foods are all very healing for can. This is like the season where we take care of clearing those cells, healing the gut, taking care of our respiratory system, making sure we're breathing well. These are all beautiful things that we can do. And so we look at these different areas, and, we can use this even if you have a breakout, right? Like if you break out on your face, like around your mouth or your jaw, like, is there something you're not saying, right? Like we can actually use physical, I mean, it's right there in front of us, right? It's just like, oh, there's some tension, there's a buildup, there's this stuck, stubborn thing. So we're gonna look, let's apply that to cancer. And so where is it in your body, and how can we apply that using these ancient traditions?
Totally. So Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, like Kara said, will help give us that map for the where we're storing it and what that represents, what different organ systems represent, what different areas of the body represent emotionally. And then, of course, go into food and herbs to really address what I was kind of talking about earlier, this like energy stagnation, which applies to both the energetic body and the emotional body. But we can really start helping things physically move through the body and get that movement back, because cancer is a stuck and stubborn disease, right? So we want to address that on both sides. Where is it stuck and stubborn on the energetic side, and where is it physically stuck and stubborn? And we're going to be getting at it both ways.
Okay. So yeah, go ahead.
And so all of you should have a PDF that came with this video. So here's the PDF. You can be following along with us either on your computer, or if you wanted to print it out so you can take notes along the way. And then on this page, you will start to see what we're going to be talking about when we're talking about the chakras from Ayurveda and the 5 elements from Chinese medicine. So this is kind of nice to have a visual when you're kind of looking at everything. But again, this is really how we start to find the root cause of the disease. Because, like we were saying before, in Chinese medicine, there's an understanding that disease happens in that energetic body that ultimately proliferates to the physical. So we can't just talk about the physical body. We can't just go in with a microscope and hone in on one area of the body. We got to step back and say, okay, why did that happen? What's that domino effect? Because it didn't originate there. There's a bigger story to this. So, like, let's take a step back. And so that's how we see, basically through holistic modalities, energy. So we start looking at the body energetically, we look at food energetically, we look at all of these things energetically to again address what in cancer is more of an energy stagnation, a stuckness in the body that creates a void. So cancer cells can get stuck there and accumulate, and nothing is trying to wipe them away. So we want to bring in that energy. So we'll start to do that by looking at the Ayurvedic chakras.
Yeah, so the chakras, and I love how you explain this, Megan. So we have these areas along, and you've probably all seen it, the seven chakras that run along our body, and it's basically this place of swirling energy where we store these. Where we store our energy through, and they all represent depending on where they are in the body. And like Megan said, you see it at your doctor's office with your gland, the map of the glands in the body. That was a very funny comparison, because yes, we are working physically, chemically with our hormones and our enzymes, and where all our fighter cells are and all the stuff. But okay, so we need to make that all move, right? That all has to be moving. And if something is stuck somewhere, so let's look at these ancient traditions that for thousands of years know where they correlate. And so you can look at your chart and we see, basically starting at the bottom, it's kind of our seat, right? We want to be stable. This is like where we root down, and we can find our inner wisdom down and rooted in the bottom. We can go with our family, and moving up, it's family, it's relationships, it's reproduction, and as we move up, it's power. Like, are you finding your own power? You're speaking your truth. We get into the heart chakra, and are you finding your joy? Is there a lot of grief? And with cancer, there is a lot of grief and sadness. So are you feeling heavy there? Are you stuck there? We move into, here's a little bit more of speaking your voice, right? Are you being heard? And so we can keep moving up through our third eye, our inner wisdom, um, you know, our partnerships. And I love this too of, Megan, how you say, like, we get our wisdom from up here, not from here, right? And so ultimately, this is like our truth and our connection to the spirit. And so, are we honoring that and opening that? So, as we run through these chakras, we can feel this free energy. And if something is going to be stuck, it's going to interrupt this whole process that our body has, right?
Mhm. Yeah, there'll literally be like a void in that. And it's something I do with my clients when we're working on this energetic level is you can even just take a necklace, but you can hold it over these different chakras of the body. And when you hold it really still, it'll start to spin in a circle because energy is coming off of us. So you can feel it, which is why you can feel if you don't even see someone's walking up behind you and you can tell they're really close to you. You feel that our energies are starting to merge and you can feel that. And I always say too, with reading the chakras and how a necklace can pick that up, it's not the necklace that's doing the work. It's the necklace is like a flag, right? We know a flag isn't doing anything other than reading the fact that there's presence of wind, right? The wind could be strong or the wind could be, there could be no wind and it will just hang there. So when you do this, you can actually see if that rotation is nice and big and strong, that's great. That's a lot of energy flow in that area. If it just hangs and doesn't do anything, that's a lack of, right? There isn't that energy moving. So you can actually just lay down on your bed and kind of work your way up each chakra aura and even read it. You can just see that energy coming. And it's also really interesting too. I'll do with my clients kind of as like a little warm up of just, holding that necklace in your hand and saying something positive and thinking of something happy. It'll be spinning and going really fast. And once you think of something devastating and sad, it will just drop and hang. So you can see immediately how quickly these energetic bodies can shift. And chronically over time, if you're always stuck with these emotions within the body, you can see how long that energetic stagnation can be there, which is how disease proliferates in that body because it's a vulnerable area. It's easy because nothing's pushing it out. And then, of course, we get into Chinese medicine. So there's a lot of overlap between these two things, between Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, which we love, again, because they're looking energetically at what's going on between the body, between the foods, and everything like that. So Chinese medicine goes kind of more specifically into the organ systems. So this might be a nice way, too, for you to directly apply an organ system that might be vulnerable for you or affected by cancer, and what that means on an energetic level and an emotional level, what they represent, because every organ has basically an emotion to it, according to Chinese medicine. So the lung and the large intestine, they pair together, and the season is the fall for them. So that would mean that fall types of foods are going to be really clearing for them and also repairing and nourishing and healing. But what they represent on the emotional level is grief, sadness, swallowing, suppressing emotions, especially when you look at the large intestine. That's like a deep, deep suppression of emotion. More of the lungs would be more of the grief and the sadness. So you can also look at this as, one of those times where people who are diagnosed with lung cancer, some of them have never smoked a day in their life. And you're like, how in the world do they have lung cancer? For me, when I know what these different organ systems and emotions go, I immediately think there must be a lot of grief and sadness that they have held on to, that's in the lungs, that hasn't been able to come out. Maybe they never grieved over the loss of something, or whatever it is, and that's held there in that lung area, so they might express lung cancer. So that's what's going on there, for example. Then you go to the kidney and the bladder. So those organs work together according to Chinese medicine, and that season is the winter. So winter type foods, again, will nourish that area of the body and help heal it. This kind of has to deal with more of the fear, which can proliferate in depression or anxiety, fear of the past, fear and anxiety of the future, feeling not good enough or not safe, having lack, chronic fatigue, weak circulation, things like that. So that's kind of the emotion that goes along with that. The liver and the gallbladder work together, and they're side by side right here on the right side. For all cancers, we really do look at liver and gallbladder because it's such a main detoxification organ, and we'll get into that later. But if you're really looking at that, even with blood, like leukemias and blood type of cancers as well, we look to that because the liver is the filter of the blood. It's like, it's got a huge, huge job. It's so important in the body. But it's really, really sensitive to holding on to emotions. And when emotions are held in that area, it comes out as anger, frustration, resentment, bitter or hot temper, suppressing all of that. And so, and then it can also come up the head, and people might have lots of migraines or headaches or anything like that. Blurry vision or anything with the eyes and the side of the head would be gallbladder. So that's what we'd be looking at there. Then we go to the heart and the small intestine. Those pair together, they work together. That is the season of summer. And I'll say, sorry, too, the liver and the gallbladder was the season of the spring. So they love cleansing and detoxing, right? That's going to be really great for the liver and gallbladder. And then the heart and small intestine love summertime foods. That's going to be really healing and cooling to them as well. And like Kara said, with the chakras, we're looking at that joy aspect. There's probably a lack of joy, sometimes even an excess of joy, right? Those who might show on the outside a lot of joy, but on the inside, it's really not there. So anything on either side of the spectrum is going to be, we want to be right in the middle, have a good balance of both. It could be heartbroken, loneliness, which I know is really common nowadays, lack of community. That's really, like, community is super healing to the heart, not being true to yourself, a disturbed spirit, lack of trust, busy mind. And when we're looking to at that small intestine, like difficulty absorbing life, digesting life, kind of, that kind of stuff. And then finally, we have the spleen in the stomach, which is actually a fifth season they added in Chinese medicine, which is kind of interesting because it's that late summer. So after summer, right before fall, it's right there. And it actually addresses, again, that stomach, spleen, pancreas, kind of a lot of the modern, diseases in terms of diabetes, our sugar and insulin and all of that. It really addresses that area. But emotionally, those organ systems hold on to that worry emotion, that overthinking emotion, chronic worry, lack of sweetness in life as well. If you feel that you don't know where sweetness is in life, and then we tend to find it through food as well. And then, so that's what can throw off our insulin and all of that. Again, it's another area of digestion. It's a difficulty digesting life, excess dampness in the body energetically, lack of fire, and self-nourishment, really. So that's a lot of the self there, which again, you can look at the chakra and say, okay, that's your third chakra. Like Kara said, the self-worth, your own self-power, and all of that. So hopefully that kind of maybe gives you a little bit more of a roadmap. And like Kara said earlier on, it might feel like, no, everything's fine. Oh, that's totally not me. But you actually might start even recognizing, oh, but that's so my dad, and he has this, or that's so and so, right? You start to recognize that. And then maybe finally you can recognize it in yourself. It's kind of hard sometimes to be critical like that. But this is a good place to start.
And I'm just hearing all these nuggets of wisdom in there. And this is, again, just like information to give you some power to understand what's happening in your body without, going to get a test, and looking at numbers. Like, let me feel what's going on. And I mean, just when you were talking about the liver and anger and resentment, Megan, like, and there's a lot of people treat cancer in with these spring, the cleansing, right? We hear a lot of like juice cleansing, and you have to be a vegan. And these are, and this all stems from it. And so that's where I was going. We don't like saying fight cancer. The people who are F cancer and get all mad at it, like that is just proliferating that problem right there. It's probably where it all started.
Totally.
And so, yes, that kind of eating is going to really help that kind of person just cool things down, detox things out. But there's also that other side of, somebody who's just feeling weak and depleted. And I was, feeling we're going to go like into the foods of that, and like, how do we find our strength? How do we comfort ourselves using food? So we're going to do that. But before that, like this is all, again, like we're talking about, it's energy stagnation, it's physical stagnation, it's proliferated into a physical stagnation that we are calling cancer, where it just won't leave, right? So what's going to be really important there is movement, like just movement, right? So getting out and walking, gardening, jumping on your trampoline, like whatever you need to do to get things moving, to get the lymph system moving, because that is what's moving around all your fighter cells and your lymph cells and all this kind of stuff that's helping us clear. So we have to get it moving. Like it's just a non-negotiable. This is going to help open up things. And even just, sitting in a meditation class and opening up your channels, being open to receiving, moving, using breath to move through these, through these stuck spaces, and even massages, right? Go get yourself a massage and find those stuck places and breathe into it and get through it. This is all really important. And when you find that emotional stagnation, how do we get that out? Like maybe it's journaling, maybe it's speaking with someone, with a counselor, maybe it's just speaking with, someone that you're in a relationship with, or that something needs to come out, or maybe it's getting out of a relationship. So there's a lot going on there, and we have to find our ways out of it. But there's also other physical blockers, like we talked about, that are around in our environment and in our house. And this is really important to address before we get into the food, because obviously when you put something in your mouth, you are digesting it. It is all those molecules are going into your blood and your body, and becoming, you are what you eat, and you are what you eat. So we can get into that too. So it's important to source things. But there's also these chemical carcinogens that are around that live in like our laundry detergent and our dryer sheets and our lotion and our shampoo and our makeup. These things all have preservatives and chemicals in there so that they can be around and be stored for a really long time, even in our foods. We're going to talk about that too. And it's really important to avoid these things because they are meant to preserve things so that they stay around for a really long time. And what are we trying to do right now is get rid of these cells that are staying around for a really long time and won't leave, right?
Exactly.
So, like using common sense, we don't have to wait for the science to come out that this is not good for you. But anything with a fragrance or a flavor or a perfume, really strong scents. So, yes, we love that you're going to take a bath and doing that self-care for yourself, but don't go lighting an airwick candle with all these chemicals into the air, right? Get yourself a nice natural beeswax candle. You can use essential oils that are really pure and get all those, and then you're getting the healing benefits of that straight oil that we're looking for.
I love that. That's so good. Yeah, it's really getting things out of the way of the body so that it doesn't have to, be so busy taking care of all of that stuff and potentially not able to clear, yeah, a lot of these chemicals, like Kara was saying, they are known carcinogens. That's only the ones that have been scientifically tested to be that. Kara and I always say we don't wait for the science. We just assume that anything chemically, petroleum-based, man-made, whatever it is going to be pretty toxic for the body. That's going to interfere with our body's ability to function optimally, which will increase our chances to developing disease of all sorts, and especially things like cancer. So yeah, exactly. Cleaning up your house, cleaning up your home, making that a safe sanctuary for yourself. And then you can move forward to, again, doing that physically with the foods that we eat as well. So a really cool quote by Bruce Lipton, who's really well-renowned doctor and cell biologist. He says, "The fate of the cell is controlled by the conditions of the environment. The blood composition is really the factor that controls the genetic response of the cells." So he's talking so much about making sure the quality of the blood is clear and clean, which is going to take a lot of that cleaning up our own environment so that we're not adding things in constantly. And then he's also talking about how the genetics of disease work. He's referring lightly to epigenetics, which is the latest study within how genetics work, where we believed for so many decades that if you have a gene, that means it's going to respond in this certain way in your body and you would be susceptible to certain diseases if you had that gene. What epigenetics actually shows is that the gene expression actually has to be turned on, and it can also be turned off. So just because you have a gene doesn't mean you're automatically going to have that disease. What has to happen is you have to do the certain lifestyle, food, and environmental practices to turn that on. And that can happen quite often within families. You could see, okay, we have this history of breast cancer or whatever it is. We all have this gene, right? So there's been a lot of focus specifically in that cancer on that BRCA gene, right? Um, But and we do see a high correlation of it being passed down through the family. So you would say, well, of course, there's that correlation. But correlation does not always equal causation. Correlation, we have to take into account everything. We can't just look at under a microscope and say, you have that gene, this is what's going to happen. We have to, again, take a step back and say, okay, sure, but what is going on? What patterns are continuing that are allowing this gene to stay on in your sister, the mother, all of these things? It's a pattern that's proliferating and continuing through a family. A lot of it, especially when it's family related, is on that emotional level, right? And that energetic level, these patterns within families that we swallow things, we hold on to things, we carry it through, right? And then also, we've all grown up together, so we probably eat in similar ways, right? So we're going to be eating and repeating these patterns over and over, that's keeping that gene expression on. So what we want to do is we want to stop these patterns from happening, shift the way that we're eating, shift the way that we're handling our emotions, start clearing things out, and that is going to help turn that expression off. And this applies for all types of diseases, but especially when we're looking at cancer, it's very important.
And it's a big ask, right? Like breaking cycles is a really hard
Oh
thing to do.
yeah.
And when it comes to food, breaking habits is really difficult to do. We're used to these certain foods. It brings us comfort and joy because that's what, our grandmother made us. That's what our mom made us, or our dad or our grandpa, sorry. But, um, but it's really important to so we like to really simplify things here at Simply Seasonal. And what we've kind of learned, and we've heard, well, I know I'm supposed to make this. I bought this cancer, cooking for cancer, all these recipes, but they're so complicated, right? We're just saying, get these foods in your body, whatever it takes. The most simplest thing, right? If we say eat a cauliflower, simply just, you don't have to make cauliflower a la, well, you don't need some fancy Martha Stewart recipe with 500 ingredients. Like, just chop up the cauliflower, put some olive oil, salt, and pepper on it, and stick it in the oven. And a roasted cauliflower is like the most delicious thing. You can eat like popcorn, right? And it's like that. If that's all you ate for dinner, like, good on you. Like, that's what I do sometimes. But it's really important that you get living foods in your body, because we are looking for life. Our body wants to live, right? You look at the crack in the sidewalk. We've covered the earth in the cement, and there's this little crack, and some light gets in there, and there's a little bit of dirt, and the light and the rain gets in there, and out pops life, right? Like, the weeds come up, and we're like, I have to go kill it. But like, what's happening is, like, life wants to live. It's like bubbling through the sidewalk. It wants to live so bad. And the same is happening with our cells in our bodies. But to do that, right, it needed the light and the water. If that was in a shady place underneath, a ledge where it wasn't getting what it needed, that it wouldn't grow there. And if it did, it would be growing more like mold, right? And that's not the kind of life we want growing from our bodies. So adding living foods to your body is going to create more living life, right? So when we're putting dead foods in our body, that is helping to promote that, stuck and not able to digest. And I don't know what to do with this chemical. I'm going to throw it into the liver because I've got nowhere else to put it, So, and the liver's full. I'm going to throw it into that cell block over there and just store it over there. And so we have all these chemicals stored in our body and don't know where to go. So this is what we're doing, and clearing all that out. And we are constantly rebuilding and making new cells, right? So you have this chance, right? Every 3 months, we basically have new blood because we're constantly creating new blood cells. So like Megan was saying, this isn't like eat this and you'll be fixed tomorrow, but over time, we are now retraining our cells to reproduce these, beautiful living cells full of phytonutrients and full of, all these beautiful antioxidants that are helping to clear out the bad ones and the nutrients to build the new ones. And our body knows what to do. We just have to get it in us.
Yeah, and that's huge too, because your body regenerates new blood every 3 months. So every, what is that, 90 days, you have a new circulation of new blood. And we see, like Bruce Lipton said, how important that quality of blood is. So if you stick with something for 3 months, you make a massive change to what's going on. So know that these things do matter and they do add up and they are working, whether you can see it or not. That's kind of the mystery sometimes of healing, is that a lot of times we don't see the action happening. But when we know that we're taking these steps and we really are being consistent, we know on a deep, deep level things are shifting and things are going to be changing. And that's really what we look at when we use food to heal. Is we're looking at two different modalities and ways that we approach it. So cleansing the blood is one, and deeply nourishing the body is the other. So when we talk about cleansing the blood, like Kara touched on, this is kind of more of the traditional ways of using food for cancer. It's a lot of cleansing. It's a lot of plant-based foods. You can do juicing. You can do a master cleanse. You can do smoothies, become vegan, all of these things, which can be very beneficial if we are really trying to detox and bring that toxicity load out of the body, increase a lot of energy movement. That's super great. And especially during the spring and the summer, incredibly great. If you're also feeling that hot, burning, inflammation, great as well, no matter what time of year, really, because when we're treating a certain disease, sometimes we just got to go into those foods that are going to be helping and healing us. So even if it's winter, but we're feeling this way and we've got, cancer in our body, yes, we're going to start juice cleansing. We might do a master cleanse. You can also do green coffee enemas. There's a lot of resources on that. The Gerson theory is really strong on, they have a cancer protocol that you can do with that. It's really effective. I know it sounds lovely, but essentially what it's doing is it's helping to clear that liver and stimulate bile coming out of the gallbladder, because that whole area needs to be flushed out. It's very sludgy right now, and a lot of bile ducts are probably clogged up. So it comes in through the intestine and it meets right here on your right side at the end of your large intestine, right where your small intestine begins and right where your liver is. And that's where it starts stimulating this action for detoxing. It's really effective for cancer. So that's the cleansing of the blood side of using food. And then we go to the deeply nourishing side of food, which is more of the fall and the winter. We're going to be looking towards warm soups and stews. And even pasture raised meats, right? So this might be more unconventional from what you've heard for using food as for cancer. You want to avoid all meat. Again, where are you on this spectrum? If you are feeling weak, you have chronic fatigue, exhaustion, just this nausea maybe that you can't get rid of, but having like a warm soup or anything like that, like a chicken noodle soup might be really easy for you to take. Something like that. This is where we start to use that, as well as so often just with the disease itself, but especially through treatment, we get low blood counts, whether it's red or white blood cell, especially white blood cell, even at the beginning, because they're going out there and trying to, clean things up in the body. So in that case, when we're looking at blood quality, the strength of the blood, we're looking to the kidney element, right? So that's going to be wintertime foods. And also we want to be looking at our bone marrow. It's the deepest source of energy of our body is our bone marrow. And to help replenish that is going to be animal types of foods. Bone broths are one, which means they've been cooked for a really long period of time. So you're inheriting the strength of that animal, because everything, since it's been cooked for 24, 36, 48 hours, has been extracted from those bones. And now you drink it in a really warm, simple, or cook with it, simple kind of way. And your body easily absorbs that and can start to replenish its own bone marrow and its own strength. So this is where we use these foods that, again, might not be as, trendy to say or, out in popular culture, but depending on where you're at in the spectrum, what is it that you need? Are you going through treatment and you have really low blood counts? yeah, we're not really going to be cleansing so much. We actually need to be building, right? So this is how you can start to look at food and know how to use it.
And we see that depletion a lot more in women as we've been trained through the 80s and 90s. Um, to take out the fat, and oh, you can have milk but take out the fat. Like, well, what did we want from the milk in the first place? Like, it's the fat, right? Staying away from red meat, and all these things we've been told are bad, or just eating these diet foods, that when we're eating them all year long, it's actually depleting our body and not giving us the right nutrients as we need through the winter. So whether it's like thyroid, autoimmune diseases, losing bone density, all these things, these are conditions of depletion. And so, can totally see that proliferating into a cancer because we don't have what it takes to keep, holding up our bodies and keeping up that energy. So that's kind of where we're going on the depletion side. Um, so whether you're on the excess or the depletion, whichever way you're going to go, like I said, number one is going to be, well, so we're going to talk about all these, top cancer fighting foods, and you can look them up. You can Google this, and we know everybody knows blueberries and broccoli. Okay. Anything with color, anything living, anything with color is going to be, very good for your body, not just for cancer, just for living. Like, this is just life. Like, we need to eat these foods, and eat enough of them and eat a lot of them. I mean, fill your plate should be 3/4 full of living vegetables. And that's a great way to just think about it and start, right? So we don't want to go too much into that because we know that, and that's common knowledge. But we're going to get into today a little bit more about seaweed and mushrooms, and particularly cruciferous vegetables, bone broths, and some herbs that you can use. So let's kind of move through all those things.
Yeah, so you'll see in your PDF, again, we have this list of everything that Kara was just mentioning. And at the top, we have two number one foods, which are seaweed and mushrooms. We can't decide. They're both amazing, especially for cancer. So, and the reason we really want to go into these, which we will after we go through this whole list, is because they're also foods that we don't commonly eat in our world and aren't commonly talked about, but how powerful they are. So, seaweed is a toxin and heavy metal puller. This is like the number one food that I recommend, especially when people are going through treatment, because to relieve the body of all that toxicity and radiation, that's what's making everyone so nauseous and so sick. That is going to be absorbing it and pulling it out of the body. So, I mean, having seaweed at least 2 to 3 times a day, we're going to talk more about how you can do that easily, where you're not sitting there eating a seaweed salad all the time, is going to be crucial. And then we also go into mushrooms, which are the decomposers of nature, right? So what they do is they help to decompose and help things die off that aren't dying off quickly enough, right? So in the forest, you'll see a tree fallen and mushrooms on the side of it. It's helping to decompose it. If they weren't there, that tree is going to be there for quite a long time. But the cycle of life needs to have that die off so that the soil becomes nutritious and this whole cycle can continue. So that's the energy of mushrooms, is they help to break apart things that don't die off, which is cancer. So they're super, super powerful. And then, of course, there's cruciferous veggies. Kara, if you want to talk about all of those varieties.
Oh my gosh, there are so many. We thought, originally we were like, oh, it's broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts. But then when we looked into it, we're like, wow, it's kale and it's arugula and it's radishes and, all these things that we're like, oh, we didn't realize they were all part of this family. And so, like Megan says, when nature gives you like this giant umbrella of foods, it's saying like, you have to eat me some way or another. Like, I know one of me grows in your area, whether you get one or the other, right? And they do come around. They're more like our winter veggies. A lot of them, we think about them, or fall, winter. And they are really important to help detoxify our bodies. You talk more on this, Megan, because you've got more to say on that.
Yeah, so they drive detoxification specifically of carcinogenic enzymes, and are toxic to many cancer cells. Just that's their composition, which is so cool. So that's they've been studied a lot for that. That's why you hear a lot about them, and they deserve that. That's incredible. And what they really do is they help aid in detoxification of the liver. And you might notice that too when you have a lot of broccoli or cauliflower before you go to bed at night the next morning. You're going to be eliminating a lot, right? Because it's bringing in that detoxification phase two to the liver, which is phase one is cleansing the blood, metabolizing hormones, doing all these other things. And then phase two is releasing that. So much of detoxing sometimes can be, okay, we're getting this stuff clearing out, but now we need to support that second phase, which is really getting it out of the body, right? And so that's where fiber comes in. And, these veggies are full of that, of course. So it's going to help sweep through your gut, help clear the gut out too, as well, right? So it's doing all of these things at the same time. That's the beauty of food. It's hard to just pinpoint one thing to it. It's like they do so many things we're not even aware of because it's so dynamic. So
And
that's what's going on with
um,
crucifix.
there's that movement too, when you're just talking about how it comes through, you're creating all this.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, oh, move the stagnation, right? Like if something's stuck, it's going to help move it through. Yeah. Should I go on to bone broth?
Sure, sure, yeah.
So something else we really love, and of course this is more on that depletion side, is bone broth. And this is something that is so traditional. When you look to other cultures and traditions, like it's, grandma always had like the pot of soup going on the stove, right? It was like this constant, like keep adding in things and using the bones and, keep things going. And it's so full of flavor, first of all, right? But the nutrients that are in there are unmatched to anywhere else you can get. Um, we're talking the minerals that are deep in those bones. And so, first of all, we want to come from healthy, well sourced animals, right? So, we don't want some animal from a factory that's been, fed all these chemicals and hormones and all the stuff, because that is going to store in their bones. And then we are what we eat eats. So, it's very easy now. This is becoming very trendy. Hopefully if you're not in a food desert, you should be able to get your hands on. Actually, if you're out in like the ranches and the farms, you can very easily go get yourself some bones. But at the farmers markets now, you can talk to the farmers, and a lot of them are selling their bones or giving their bones away. But we always say, start with like a roasted chicken or a beef roast or whatever, and just take those bones. When everyone's done eating, you can collect all your bones. If you don't want to make it right away, you can just store them in the freezer. But you just throw them into a slow cooker and you cook them down for like a full 24, at least 24 hours. And you'll see that the bones actually start to disintegrate into the broth. And so drinking this is there's that, when the broth cools, it actually kind of gels up, like that gelatin. And that's actually really good. That's what we're looking for to put in our body, that, it's going to coat our nervous system. It's going to coat our gut. Like, this just sounds so good, right? Like it's just going to give a little blanket, a little warmth, a little smoothness. A lot of us are dealing with leaky gut these days, which is a whole nother topic. So tune into our gut health workshop for that. But these are all things that are going to really help the body function at a higher level by taking care of this. And it's really going to give you that energy. Like plant energy is amazing and so alive and flexible. And, some of it's more rooting, right? When we think about our root vegetables, help ground us, and the greens that are very flexible and light are going to give us that light energy. But nothing compares to the coming from an animal that's really going to give us that strength and vitality that we're kind of borrowing from the animal. And it's this beautiful cycle of life that we can tap into and use to our benefit.
Totally, because there's that different energy, like you're talking about, between the animal and the plant. Both are beautiful. Of course, we don't tend to eat enough plants in our society, so we tend to stress that a lot. but you also can't ignore the fact that we are omnivores, we are animals and mammals ourselves. Having that energy there is such an access for us, especially when we get it in terms of a broth. It's going to be so easy. It's going to go straight to the source, our own bones, which is what we need when we're treating and going through something like this. And with the
And
fruits and, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say one more thing on that, because if you're eating too much meat and too much unhealthy meat, that might show up as that hot condition, right? That's going to turn more into heart problems, clogged arteries and cholesterol and things like that. So it's a total different beast than having pasture raised, beautiful meat only a couple times a week or whatever, not saying every meal every day. It's like a completely different way of respecting and using meat as, in a healthy way as opposed to in excess.
Totally. And, our main focus, no matter what season that you're in, is always going to be fruits and veggies, right? So, like, what is it of that season that's there is going to be the most healing to your body. And, all fruits and veggies are full of hydration. They help flush and detox the body. Again, they go more towards that cleansing of the blood. Wintertime foods also have that grounding element and actually that nourishing of the blood. Like, think of a beet, right? A beet is so nourishing for the blood. So that can help with that grounding and nourishing of the body too. So they can play on both sides. They have all of the nutrients and things that you're looking for. They're high in antioxidants, like Kara was mentioning earlier, which helps with cell repair from cell damage, right? So cancer, that a lot of that is going on. So we want to repair cell damage with antioxidants, which come in all different colors, right? They don't have to be blueberries. It's all foods with a rainbow of colors that are rich. The darker they are, the higher in flavonoids they are, which is just another relative of kind of that antioxidant family. And the different seasons might have different colors. Like, summer is all rainbow, then we get into more of the orange and more of those deeper colors, and then we go a little bit darker, and then we get to the fresh green of spring. So, oh yeah, you got your pomegranate. Exactly. Red, deep, grounding, really good for that root chakra. All fiber rich, like we said before, to help cleanse and keep things moving, especially in the intestine. That's so important for your immune system to have your intestine balanced and healed and full of really healthy microbiome, which is where seasonal foods come in. We get all of these microorganisms from local seasonal foods. They change throughout the year. So this is why we want to do that. They also cleanse the blood. So then we also have the anti-inflammatory foods, which include things like turmeric and ginger. So you hear a lot about those, and rightfully so. They're beautiful foods. Turmeric specifically was studied for its element of curcumin, which has anti-cancer effects and does prevent the growing and spreading of cancer, especially in the breast and the intestine. So it's just interesting, and the skin. So it's just interesting to know that, but that's also what it's been studied for. It could have other benefits. We just haven't studied it yet, right? So it is good to keep these coming in. Always best to get it in as a food first rather than trying to go the supplement route, because like turmeric and the curcumin, it needs fat to move through the digestive system. Fats help absorb nutrients into every single cell of your body. So you need that. Also, that black pepper that you've probably heard about helps it absorb into the intestines, which is where most of our nutrient absorption comes from. And then ginger is the same in that turmeric family. It brings movement and circulation. It has a pungent flavor. It has heat. It's bringing in all this stuff to help clear and purge out, keep movement coming, and keep everything circulating. And then finally, just real quick, there's this root, a medicinal root called Astragalus root. When we're talking about kind of that depletion, especially in a blood depletion, red or white blood cell, astragalus root, it could be really beneficial for you. And it's kind of a long-term herb where you want to be incorporating it for like 3 months. It's great to do in the fall and the winter to prepare your immune system for that winter. But it helps to build red and white blood cells and boost the immune system. It's like a piece of wood. You wouldn't eat it, but you would cook with it. So every time you cook a soup or a stew, you throw it in there, things like that. You just start getting it in. So that's a really good herb to use to help to build the body as well.
And we will attach with this program a few recipes to simply use these things like turmeric and ginger. Of course, we love to always incorporate them into our stir fries. In the beginning of, every good dish starts with garlic and onions, and that makes the house smell so good. But ginger and turmeric are not as common in the U.S. So we'll give you some ideas on how to use that, even some simple teas and juices and things like that that are very accessible and also very delicious.
Totally. Yeah, and then on your PDF too, you can see now we're kind of getting a little bit more into the mushrooms and the seaweed. We just wanted to kind of break down a little bit more. There's specific mushrooms again that have been studied and shown to be effective for certain types of cancers specifically. All mushrooms again stimulate immunity, decompose cells that won't die off, which aids in apoptosis of the cells, and inhibits metastasis, like the cancer spreading metastasis. I can never pronounce that word right. So then we look at Mayataki mushrooms, which are also known as hen of the woods. They're great for breast and bladder cancer. Shiitake, super common, really good for cervical, ovarian, gastric, skin cancer. And you can save the stems because they're super woody. You don't usually eat them. Throw them in your freezer bag and throw them into your broth, right? So when you make your bone broth, veggie broth, whatever, you can use the stems. Reishi mushrooms are the mushroom of longevity. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You throw in your astragalus root and you can throw in some seaweed.
Boom, boom. Exactly. This is how we're going to start saying, like,
Yeah.
this is how we make it livable, right? Reishi, mushroom of longevity, it's an immunomodulator, which means it increases or slows the immune system, which is important. So a lot of cancers and going through treatment, we want to boost our immune system, right? Speed that up. So it's going to, if you take reishi, that's what it'll help you with. But then if you have an autoimmune disease, you have a very overactive immune system and you want to help calm that down. So it'll also help slow down if it needs. That's the beauty again of food. Really good for breast cancer, prostate, cervical, colon, and lung cancer. And then enoki, which are these cute little winter mushrooms, they're also called. You might see them in soups at a Japanese restaurant. Skinny and long, white little cap, have been studied a lot for skin cancer. So those are kind of yours. And you can always buy these dried and you have them in your pantry and then you just throw them in some warm water and let them sit for like 15 minutes. And then you have mushroom broth and you can use that to cook with. So mushrooms are really easy to utilize.
And some of them are not as culinary, but there's some beautiful companies will give the links to what that they're making supplements. It's just the dried mushrooms made into a powder that you can take as a supplement. So if there's a particular mushroom that speaks to you and you're like, I need to get that in my body and let it do its work. And that's the beauty of mushrooms. When you put them in your body, they just do the work and they're not going, it's not like iodine where you have to have it every day in order for it to do its work and stay in your body. You're not flushing it out every day. The mushroom likes to stick around and do its job, right? And so just getting it in your body is doing yourself a service if you're feeling called to one. So you can buy a supplement, start taking those or start cooking with one. I mean, if it's a delicious one, just start eating it.
Totally.
Some of them are a little weird.
Totally. And then we get back to seaweed. So again, a toxin and heavy metal puller, great for during and after treatments. But it's also going to help pull any toxicity that's in the body, again, accumulating from our environment, whatever. That's why it's so good to constantly be eating and having in general. It's cooling and mucilaginous. So it's going to help cool down inflammation. It's going to, that mucilaginous property, like Kara was talking about with the bone broth, that gelatin in the bone broth is going to be doing its mucilaginous the same kind of thing, coating the system, cooling everything down, especially with treatment and that burning sensation of the body. It's literally gonna, it's like aloe vera, right? It's the same type of thing. That's a mucilaginous food too. That could be great. You could have aloe vera
Good.
juice, use aloe vera. Um, uh, and then of course cooking with seaweed, right? Kind of similarly to the mushrooms like we were talking about. You can, it's dried, it comes dried, so you can store it in your pantry. We love cooking with kombu, which is basically kelp, right? So it comes in bigger pieces and you can kind of just break off maybe what you need. And then you just start cooking with it. Put it in your rice as you cook it, put it in your pasta water, your soups, your stews. And then if you want to, and I challenge you to do this, because I guarantee if you take that out, chop it up, put it back into your soup or stew or whatever it is that you're eating, you won't even notice it's in there. And you're eating the whole entire thing, which is going to have so many more benefits. But even if you only just cooked your food with it, it's absorbing all those minerals, the natural sea salts, the iodine. And then what you can do with that now cooked piece of warm seaweed, you can go lie on the couch and lay it on your body. You can lay it over the area that needs the attention. We could do a lot with the liver. You could lay it over the liver and it's going to help bring those detoxification, help pull things from the liver that the liver needs help with. You could put it over your thyroid to help with absorption of iodine, because iodine rich foods help prevent cancer. People who are low in iodine have literally 2 times the likelihood of developing cancers, and especially things like breast, thyroid, prostate, and reproductive cancers. All endocrine system related, all hormone related, right? We need iodine so much. Like Kara said, you actually need it on a daily basis. You can get it from seafoods, other things like that. Again, the sea is a great source, which is why seaweed, it's so, so rich in it. So bringing it in is going to be really, really crucial for that. And when you have it stored and dried, you can use it often as you want. So if you could cook with that at least 2 to 3 times a week, you're making a huge impact on all of those benefits.
It also brings in that umami flavor, right? Like seaweed
Mm-hmm.
as the umami, like when you go and get Thai food or Japanese food, and it's kind of like, what is that, like je ne sais quoi that I don't know, like it's just, there's something about these flavors of these foods that, like, it's just so deep, and they're now making that like the sixth sense, right? Like taste, smell, whatever. Now they're putting in umami, and it's basically just that richness and comfort food flavor. And so seaweed helps you accomplish that. So another bonus, it's going to make you a better cook.
Totally. So we hope this was really informative for you, and maybe answers a lot of your questions. Hopefully, of course, simplifies how you look at food when it comes to cancer, how to utilize it, right? Between, we're cleansing the blood and detoxifying, but we're also deeply nourishing and supporting depending on where we're at and how we're feeling. So you can go between the two whenever you need. And then, of course, addressing the emotional and the energetic body, which is where the root cause of all disease lies. And that's where, when we can start honing in and repairing there, that's where, when we can get rid of the cancer itself, we can feel more confident that this isn't going to come back, because we've stopped these cycles from happening, right? So we don't want to have that reemergence or the reoccurrence of it coming either. And all of these recipes, I mean, we cook with seaweed and all of these things all the time, simply. And in our cookbook, Simply Seasonal Cookbook, you can have access to over 52 recipes. We have over a recipe a week that is focused on each season. You just open it up to that season or to the style of food that you're needing to eat for your condition. And everything is right there.
Yeah, and never underplay the importance of good sleep, hydration, exercise, reducing stress in your life. These are all things that play into the whole body and whole health. And we even have recipes in our cookbook that help with sleep and things to help you hydrate.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can even use food to help you in these matters. But it really is the full picture of what is required for a healthy body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you again for joining us. And keep following along. Hopefully, again, this was really helpful. And we have so many resources on our website too. We have a mushroom and seaweed cancer episode that you can go watch on our website, simply-seasonal.com. And we will see you at an upcoming video and show and episode and workshop and whatever we're doing next. So
Let us know what you think. If you have any questions, comments, we're always up to chat about things and recipes and food. We can talk all day long.
yeah, awesome. We'll see
Thanks
you
for joining.
later.
Bye.